Good morning. I am Lovely Grace F. Sampaga from Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English. And our topic for today is about AFL or Assessment for Learning. Assessment for Learning or AFL is about undertaking assessment during the flow of learning in order to impact upon that learning. It sounds appealing and simple. However, it can be surprisingly challenging to put into practice. As a result, it doesn't always have the positive impact on learning that is expected. According to Professor John Hattie, who is a researcher in education and has been director of the Melbourne Educational Research Institute at the University of Melbourne, Australia since March 2011. AFL helps in making understanding and knowledge, as John Hattie describes it, more visible. AFL helps learners understand what excellence looks like and how they can develop their own work to reach that level. Assessment for Learning or AFL is an approach to teaching and learning that creates feedback, which is then used to improve students' performance. Students become more involved in the learning process and from this gain confidence in what they are expected to learn and to what standard. One way of thinking about AFL is that it aims to close the gap between a learner's current situation and where they want to be in their learning and achievement. Skilled teachers plan tasks which help learners to do this. AFL involves students becoming more active in their learning and starting to think like a teacher. They think more actively about where they are now, where they are going, and how to get there. Effective teachers integrate AFL or Assessment for Learning in their lessons as a natural part of what they do, choosing how much or how little to use the method. AFL can be adapted to suit the age and ability of the learners involved. AFL strategies are directly linked to improvements in students' performance in summative tests and examinations. Research shows that these strategies particularly help low-achieving students to enhance their learning. AFL and the relationship with formative and summative assessment. Traditionally, AFL has been closely associated with formative assessment because practices such as questioning and providing feedback help form or shape students' learning. This differs from summative assessment, which typically is an attempt to measure students' attainment at the end of a period of learning. So here is the table. So the following table based on the UK's National Foundation for Educational Research Report or NFER 2007 classifies types of formative and summative assessment as either formal or informal. Informal for formative assessments are questioning, feedback, peer assessment, and self-assessment. So for the formal, further analysis or tests, exams, essays, and target setting. And for the summative assessment, so here are the informal: essay in uncontrolled conditions, portfolios, coursework, and teacher assessment. So for the formal of the summative assessments are test, exam, essays in controlled condition. So it can be argued that all of the assessment strategies in this table support AFL if their ultimate use is to help the students progress in terms of their learning. A good example of using a summative assessment strategy in an AFL context is where a test or exam is used to identify a lack of understanding in a particular area of the syllabus, and subsequently targets are set to rectify this. There are 5 main processes that take place in assessment for learning. So the first one is questioning enables a student with the help of their teacher to find out what level they are at. Second one is the teacher provides feedback to each student about how to improve their learning. Third, students understand what successful work looks like for each task they are doing. The fourth is a student become more independent in their learning, taking part in peer assessment and self-assessment. So the last is summative assessments. The student exam or portfolio submission are also used formatively to help them improve. What are the benefits of AFL or assessment for learning? So there are 4. So the first one is AFL improves learner outcomes. Research shows that effective formative assessment is one of the most important contributors to success in summative assessment. This is because learners have a clear idea of what good work looks like and what they need to do to reach this standard. Number 2, AFL increases confidence. AFL helps create a sense of self-efficacy, a learner's confidence in their ability to reach targets through hard work and determination. This is an ability or essential quality for learners to develop. Self-efficacy will help them succeed throughout their life, both professionally and personally. Number 3, AFL increases independence. AFL enables learners to become less passive in the classroom, especially when combined with other methods that promote this type of approach, such as active learning techniques. Students will help develop the ability to assess themselves and to take responsibility for their own learning. Number 4, AFL changes the culture of the classroom. Carol Dweck argues that high-achieving learners avoid taking risks because they are afraid of making mistakes. This reduces the amount they can learn. An AFL approach helps to create a supportive and cooperative classroom. In this environment, everyone, including the teacher, should feel able to try new things without worrying that they might fail. If the teacher presents mistake as an opportunity for learning, this will help every student to reach their full potential. Students will start to see that by learning from failure, they can improve outcomes in the future. 6 misconceptions about AFL. Number 1, assessment and testing are the same thing. There are lots of different ways to assess a learner. This includes formal testing. However, a teacher will use a variety of formal and informal assessment activities throughout the learning process. Any activity which checks how well a student is learning is assessing that student's learning. Information from these assessment activities is used to adapt teaching and learning approaches, which leads to improvements in learner outcomes. Number 2, Teachers using AFL will lose control of their class. AFL requires teachers to allow learners to discuss work between themselves in class. This will naturally involve some talking and therefore some noise. However, the teacher remains in control. The teacher decides when to let the class talk and when to ask them to be quiet. It is also often the case of behavior. Usually improves when learners' understanding improves. Number 3. Peer feedback means students chatting to each other rather than working on a task. Peer feedback can only take place when learners have a clear idea about what they are discussing and the areas that they should and should not be giving feedback about. Learners should always think about and understand how they are judging each other's work. The more learners engage with and think deeply about the success criteria, the more they are able to give useful feedback to their peers. Number 4. Examinations are the only type of assessment that matter. Learners need to take formal exams to get qualifications to progress through their education. Assessment for learning gives teacher more information throughout the year. One of the results of an AFL approach is that it helps students to do better in summative assessment. The two are linked and both inform future learning. Number 5. Assessment is one-way process. Teachers give students feedback about their work. The most effective feedback is a dialogue. Teacher can learn more about their learners' progress when their learners take a more active role in assessing their own performance. For example, through self-assessment, learners can identify what they need to help with and then discuss this with their teacher. Number 6. Work should always be given a grade or mark. In some circumstances, a grade will be given as part of teachers' feedback. However, research suggests that learners will often just read the grade and ignore the comments. Where teachers want to give a grade, it is often more effective for learners to read feedback and comments first, and then edit their work before they see a grade. So the next one is, what are the challenges of AFL? Number 1. Misunderstanding. The word assessment often leads to confusion because it is usually used to refer to summative testing. AFL mainly focuses on the use of informal formative assessment to improve learning. Although teachers and learners can also learn from their work in formal summative test papers, that is not the main emphasis of AFL. Number 2. Training and time. Introducing AFL into school or classroom takes time. It sometimes requires additional professional training, and it changes to the ways that teachers interact with their learners. Number 3. Fear of change. Teachers and learners may fear that the changes required in their classroom practice will not help them. High-achieving and diligent learners may find it hard to look for faults and mistakes in their work and thinking. They may feel that they do not want to show any sign of weakness or failure. Number 4. Getting it right. Giving feedback to learners about their work can have a negative effect as well as positive. A teacher must choose their words carefully when giving feedback. If the teacher gives the impression that only the teachers can provide the right answer, learners will find it hard to be independent. Number 5. Culture. Sometimes teachers are judged solely on their ability to get good results in high-stakes summative assessment. Teachers may feel that they do not have time to do activities that do not seem directly linked to final examination grades. However, using feedback to modify instruction and help learners to better understand assessment objectives will improve exam results. Assessment for learning in practice. AFL emphasizes the creation of a learner-centered classroom with a supportive atmosphere, where students are not afraid to make mistakes and learn from them. We are going to look at 5 approaches of strategies that you can use in a lesson or program of study. So here they are. Number 1, questioning. Questions are a quick and important way of finding out what your learner understands about the subject. You can use this information to plan their teaching. There are 2 main types of question, which is the closed and the open. So the closed question requires a short answer, such as remembering a fact. The answer is usually right or wrong. For the open question, need longer answers and often require the learner to provide an opinion. Dialogic teaching is a term that describes ongoing talk between teachers and learners, which leads to effective learning. If you discuss ideas with your learners, you can get a clearer view of what understanding your learners have about the topic and put right any misunderstandings. Number 2, feedback. Feedback is the process in which learners come together with their teacher to discuss where they are in their learning, where they want to be in their learning, and how they are going to get there. It is usually involves looking at a particular piece of work done by the learners. Feedback can be described as the bridge between teaching and learning. Number 3, peer assessment or peer feedback. Peer feedback or peer assessment is the process by which learners assess each other's works and give each other's feedback. This feedback is based on an understanding of what makes a successful piece of work. The teacher is vital to this process, as teachers know their learners and can help them to develop their critical and reflective thinking skills. Number 4, self-assessment. In self-assessment, a learner evaluates their own work and thinks about their own learning. This helps them to make sense of what the teacher says, relate it to previous learning, and use this for new learning. Ultimately, self-assessment enables learners to set their own learning.
However, be aware that learners cannot become reflective learners overnight. It takes time and practice to develop these skills, and the role of the teacher is crucial in encouraging this. Number 5, the formative use of school tests and exams. This Getting Started guide has focused mainly on formative assessment strategies and checking learning in the classroom. However, learners often have to take summative school tests such as end-of-year exams or final exams. Return mark tests or exam papers to learners so that they can spend time understanding where they earned most marks and where they had misunderstandings. After the exam or test, find out which questions were answered less well by most learners. This will give you important information about what subject, ideas, and skills your learners need to be worked on. You can then focus on explaining the areas of the syllabus that give problems to most learners. Your learners could also rework exam questions in class, in pairs, or groups as a peer learning activity. In conclusion, assessment can range from simply asking questions during a lesson to class presentation after a unit of study. Assessment is not only a way we can measure student performance, but it is also a way for teachers to plan instruction and reflect on their own methods of teaching. Assessment is a way for students and teachers to evaluate their learning.